Hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Alma, and on behalf of the American Marketing Association, I'd like to welcome everyone to today's webcast, which is sponsored by IBM Watson Analytics, entitled How to Use Data, Find Patterns, and Improve Marketing Decisions. So before we get started, I just wanted to cover a few housekeeping items. This webcast is being recorded and will be made available to you soon. We invite everyone to continue this conversation on Twitter by adding or searching for #WatsonAnalytics. And if you have any content or technical related questions today, please feel free to ask them at any time by using the chat box on the left-hand side of your screen. And so with that, I'm very happy to introduce our two speakers for today. We have Dr. Girish Poonj, who's the Professor of Marketing and an Ackerman Scholar, the School of Business, University of Connecticut, Doors. And just some quick insights about Dr. Poonj. As Professor of Marketing at the University of Connecticut, Dr. Poonj is currently focused on researching data on digital marketing, e-commerce, consumer decision making in web-based environments, online product reviews, just to name a few research interests. And we also have Stephen Architz with us, who's the Portfolio Marketing Manager with IBM Watson Analytics. And just some facts about Stephen as well. He has 9 years of experience as a sales representative as well as a product marketing manager for other products in the IBM SPSS Predictive Analytics portfolio. So with that, I will let the experts take over, and I'm happy to turn things over to Girish to get us started.
Welcome everybody once again. And a good place to start today's discussion would be with the advent of big data. We have all heard the term. Nobody quite really knows what it means. But what we are here to chat about is how this phenomenon is affecting marketing decision making. And as you know, there are various sources of marketing data that have become available. And what I'd like to talk about is how this can be used to improve marketing decisions. So a good place to start is making a distinction between data, information, and knowledge. And what we would like to do eventually is discover knowledge, or another way of saying that is discover marketing intelligence. And there is a two-step process to this. The first step would be taking data and converting it into information. And in this step, what we're looking for are patterns that are hidden in the data. And it's these patterns then get translated into marketing intelligence. So this is done, can be done in a variety of ways. It can be done through traditional statistical methodology, or it could also be done through building analytical models. So what I'd like to emphasize today is that how we need both these components, the statistical part and the analytical part, to discover marketing knowledge. So what we're going to do now is take a look at these two approaches that I just mentioned. The first one I'll call data discovery, and the other one we are all familiar with is statistics. And so what is happening with the advent of big data is that there is an increased emphasis on data discovery as the first step. And with the availability of algorithms that are user-friendly, it's possible now for managers and users to deploy these algorithms themselves without relying on the professional analyst. And the other aspect of knowledge discovery in marketing is that there is a focus on using all the data that is available rather than just basing decision making on samples, which has been the case in statistics. So, what we need, what I will try and illustrate, is the importance of both approaches to marketing decision making. Now, just comparing statistics with data discovery, what we see here are, in addition to the sampling issue that I just mentioned, the focus in data discovery is on creating actionable findings, whereas the focus in statistics traditionally has been on coming up with conclusions. And the other thing you will notice is that there's a greater focus on exploration in data discovery rather than confirmation. So let's take a look now at the typical marketing strategy situation. As most of you know, there are 3 different steps that are involved here. The first one of which is segmentation, or identifying consumer segments to match organizational resources with segments that might be most suited for the company. After these segments have been identified, then the focus shifts to targeting these segments with products or services or campaigns that are intended to achieve the marketing outcome of interest. And while doing that, it's also important to take into account competition and to position your product and service in relation to the competition. Now, the nature of big data has pretty much kept the marketing strategy component as it has been before, but what has changed is the type of approach, the type of analysis that goes into marketing decision making. So let's take a typical situation. Let's assume that we are a company and we have been losing customers, and this loss of customers is typically happening after an initial introductory period. And let's say we are losing as much as 40% of our customers. So now, in order to approach this situation, there's 2 ways we could go about this. Is that we could give new incentives to those customers who are leaving, but of course that would be very costly. Or we could let these customers go and try and acquire new customers, which is of course very difficult in this day and age of customer acquisition. So what we see here is a typical marketing challenge, and there could be various causes for this. So we could have a situation where the customer loss is because of a competitive action. Maybe a competitor is trying to get us into a price war or is undercutting us on prices. Or it could also be that our service quality or product quality has been lowered due to our own cost-cutting efforts. Or we could be facing a situation where we have a new competitor who's using a new channel to reach our customers. So there are various possibilities here, and a good starting point for examining all these possibilities is to fall back on all the different sources of data we have. And one of the first steps that would occur here is a data audit to locate what kind of data internally within the company might be available to address these questions. And if we find that there's not adequate internal data, then we may have to go to external sources. We might have to buy data from companies that are in the business of selling data, and that's going to vary industry by industry. So for instance, we might have to rely on Nielsen data if we are a media company or a retail organization. Or we might have to rely on data from other sources depending on what industry we are in. So once we have our data sources, then the next step would be curating the data to make sure that it is suitable for analytical modeling. And that might involve trying to normalize the data, trying to fill in missing values, trying to understand outlying data, any of those steps that might be needed prior to processing. And then the first step in the age of big data is creating visualizations. Now this is something which is a relatively new approach, and the reason for that is that it's very difficult, given the nature of big data, it's very difficult to try and understand data either in summary form or in the nature of spreadsheets. Once we've created visualizations, then we will go on to our next step, which is predictive modeling. And now the nature of predictive modeling has changed substantially over the last several years. And what we find increasingly are these 5 techniques that are suitable for marketing situations. And we have a variety of statistical tools and analytical methods that can be used for these 5 purposes. So let's take the case of estimation and prediction together. The statistical tools we could use here might be linear regression or logistic regression. And these would give us, for instance, predictions of what a customer's lifetime value to the company might be. Now, beyond estimation and prediction, we also have classification. And in classification, what we would seek to do is try and predict whether a customer is a potential customer, or what is their propensity to become a potential customer. So in the case of classification, the appropriate methods might be using decision trees. And we have, again, 2 kinds of approaches we could use. We could use decision trees that are statistics-based, or decision trees which are more analytical-based. And then we go on to clustering. And in clustering, what we're seeking is identifying customers that might be best suited for the company's offers. And it ties back to the marketing strategy question that we had looked at earlier. And then finally, we have a relatively common approach in analytical marketing, and that is identifying associations or affinities between either products or customers. And a common application of association rules or affinity rules is market basket analysis, where the company is trying to predict what the consumer is going to buy next based on what is currently in their market basket or what's currently their purchases. So the recommendation here for improving marketing decisions is to rely on software that covers these 5 areas. And a more important recommendation than that would be to use both the data discovery methodologies we spoke about earlier, as well as the statistical tools that are available for doing these tasks. In fact, a good approach here is to use the data discovery method first to identify patterns. And once these patterns are identified, then fall back on statistical methods for confirmation. So data discovery and statistical modeling would work hand in hand, and one would complement the other. Now, another approach that we find is happening in improving marketing decisions is this atmosphere of competing and collaborating at the same time. We no longer have situations where the analyst is working off on their own. We typically have a situation where the analyst and the decision maker are engaged all through the modeling process. And so that is a new change, this culture of challenge. And the way that would work in an organization is that you have teams, internal teams that are competing with one another to solve a particular marketing problem initially. And as they come up with solutions at some point, since they're part of the same company, working on the same challenge, they begin to collaborate. So that is another phenomenon that we're seeing. And also in the culture of challenge is that every assumption that is being made either by the analyst or by the managers is challenged. Because often what has been found is that predictions or conclusions are made based on assumptions which were not valid or did not get tested. So this is part of the new phenomenon that's occurring in marketing decision making. Now I'm going to hand it over to Stephen, and he's going to go further and sort of illustrate some of these ideas based on analytics software provided by IBM. Stephen, over to you.
Thanks, Girish. So what I want to do now is talk a little bit about IBM Watson Analytics and connect it back to some of the themes and ideas that Girish just talked about at a high level from a marketing decision scenario and how Watson Analytics can help in that process and help with your marketing strategy. So if you're not aware, so Watson Analytics is a relatively new offering from IBM. It's been in market about a little over a year and a half now, I guess it's approaching 2 years at the end of this year. And it is our data discovery service in the cloud. And the original intent with Watson Analytics was really to provide users that primarily sit in line of business. So we're targeting that marketing manager or the marketing director, someone that has deep knowledge of their business and they have access to data, but they're not necessarily that data scientist or the statistician or the analyst that Girish mentioned. They're much more involved in the business side of things, and typically they rely on that analyst to answer questions. And the intent with Watson Analytics is to provide some of those capabilities and put them into the hands of those types of users. So we're putting very advanced analytic capabilities without really the complexity. So we're giving users the ability to explore their data, to analyze that data, to visualize that data, to uncover patterns and insights in that data, and ultimately using those insights to lead to better decision making. Now, there are 4 unique capabilities that Watson Analytics has. And again, kind of continuing this theme about providing analytics without the complexity, a lot of this has been designed to make this functionality much more accessible for our target user. So to take a little bit of a closer look at these, one of the first pieces of functionality that's fairly unique to Watson Analytics is data prep made easy. And one of the first things that happens within Watson Analytics when a data set, and whether this is a spreadsheet of data, so it could be the results of your most recent marketing campaign, it could be some customer response information, some demographic information, transactional information, any type of data you had. It could even be in a database, but we see a lot of people using spreadsheets. When that data set's uploaded, right off the bat, we're providing you a data quality score. So we're going to let you know how ready is this data for analysis. Are there issues with this data? And that's because that primary user isn't necessarily aware of the pitfalls of things like outliers and missing values and skewness and imbalance in their data. So we're letting you right off the bat let you know how good this data is. And then there are some within the product, some additional functionality to help prep and cleanse that data and get it ready for analysis. So all of that can be done within the product. You can create new calculations, hierarchies, groups, and really make sure that the data is ready for analysis before continuing. That then takes us to the next functionality. So the data itself, Watson Analytics, and this is where some of the cognitive capabilities of Watson Analytics come into play. Watson Analytics will look at that data set and it attempts to jumpstart a user's analysis. So it's trying to tell you what is important in this data, what might you be looking for. So this has the benefit of either accelerating your analysis because it's going to bring up things that you already wanted to know, or it may prompt interest in some things you may not have been thinking about. And so it may alert you to other interesting areas in your data. Now, if none of those recommended starting points or interest you, you can simply type a question. So no longer do you have to know, okay, well, I want to look at sales by month, by region, or I want to look at response by customer, by region. All right, so I want to grab a bar chart, and then I want to drag and drop in these variables. You can simply type that as a question, just as you would ask a colleague. Watson Analytics recognizes that question, and it automatically will bring up that option for you and display the data in the most appropriate visualization. So the intent here really is to help kind of guide you towards, to guide you not only towards what might be interesting in the data, but then allowing you to write, to type your own questions. But also once that visualization does come up, there's also actually going to be another discovery pane that is trying to guide you to other interesting things based on that specific question that you typed. So it's really about kind of guiding users to the most relevant information and guiding them towards interesting things and interesting insights in their data. Which brings us to the next unique capability within Watson Analytics, and this is really where we're starting to blend the concepts of data discovery and statistics, as Girish talked about earlier, in that within Watson Analytics we are trying to provide users some more of those advanced statistics or predictive analytic capabilities. So you can start to uncover what does drive response. Who is responding to my campaigns, or what's driving customer churn? Why are these customers leaving? Is there a specific profile of customer type that I need to be maybe potentially targeting? And so Watson Analytics does allow you to discover those key drivers in your analysis. So related to some of the predictive modeling techniques that Girish mentioned, Watson Analytics does have, under the covers here, it does have some linear regression as one of the techniques, and it also has shade decision trees. So you are getting some of that functionality to start to remove and uncover unbiased findings. I think that that was, or statistically significant findings, I guess, to put it another way, that now instead of coming up with your own hypothesis, you can interrogate the data and let Watson Analytics tell you what the most important drivers are, and really help kind of narrow your analysis down to those most important drivers, as opposed to kind of aimlessly wandering through your analysis and maybe trying to come up with your own hypothesis, which may or may not be true. And then finally, within Watson Analytics, one of the unique capabilities is that ability that once you have done your analysis, you have created visualizations, you have uncovered some predictive drivers, how do we now communicate and share this information with others? And Watson Analytics does give you a number of ways to do that. But essentially, you can create your own dashboard, and then combine all those findings into one view, or maybe into multiple views, and then share that with others in your organization within Watson Analytics. But if they're not using Watson Analytics, you can still export that out into a PowerPoint presentation or a PDF report. But we do give you a number of ways to collaborate with others, just to Girish's point around how do we create that culture of backing up our findings with data, and this is what the data has told us, not just this is how we've always done things. Now I've already touched on this earlier, but Watson Analytics really was meant to provide some self-service analytic capabilities to that line of business user. But that's not to say that the experts, the business analysts and the data scientists, still can't take advantage of some of these capabilities, especially when it comes to communicating the output of complex analysis. Most users aren't necessarily going to understand, especially if you don't come from a research, market research background. If you're more of a content creator or a product marketer, you're not going to necessarily understand a complex statistical equation or a predictive algorithm. So Watson Analytics does give you the ability to create data visualizations that can clearly communicate and convey the results of your analysis. Now, Watson Analytics is really meant to be, or it is a general purpose ad hoc analytics solution. So it does apply to multiple industries and multitude of use cases. Basically, it comes down to whether or not do you have data, do you have a question. You can use Watson Analytics for it. But just at a high level, for example, if I'm in the telco industry, using Watson Analytics for social media, I can actually start to do some basic analysis of my brand health and monitoring. So, what are customers saying about my brand? What are they saying about my competition? Is it positive or negative on social media? Could I be alerted to something that may be trending that could potentially negatively affect our business and cause customers to leave? But I can also start to identify things like the demographics. Are people male or female? Are they married? Do they have children? Where are they talking? Geographically, do we have customers talking more in the United States versus Canada or Mexico? Are we worldwide? So it does kind of give you that ability to start to monitor your brand and also start to see what people may be saying about your competition. Additionally, maybe in the banking industry, if we want to look at campaign response rates, we want to understand who was responding to our campaigns, why were they responding, and ultimately use those insights to build better performing marketing campaigns and start targeting the right person who will respond to the campaigns that we want to execute. And also within insurance, we may even want to look at the high level use case of looking at the return on marketing investments. So today with organizations really wanting to be more efficient and kind of justifying the money and the budget that's being spent. So being able to understand whether or not these marketing campaigns, are they working? What was the return? Did we get a positive increase in the number of impressions? Did we generate the right kind of activity? Did we generate sales? Did we generate opportunities? So essentially kind of expanding that, looking more also which campaigns are working and why, looking at our web traffic, our conversion rates, the average sales, and really being able to kind of justify the marketing activities that we're doing. So again, you can put all this data into Watson Analytics and quickly explore, create visualizations, understand some of the predictive drivers, and have that information to communicate to superiors on why this is why we're doing this, and this is the return we're getting, and this is why these things are working or may not be working. So just to recap, again, Watson Analytics is our guided data analysis and visualization service. It is on the cloud, so it can be accessed anytime, anywhere. It allows you to explore your data, to analyze your data, to understand key drivers in your data, ultimately finding those patterns that lead to better decisions. And most importantly, you can start for free by going to watsonanalytics.com. So if you're interested in learning more, we do have some information. These are a number of books that Girish recommends if you want to kind of get started in this or looking for more advanced information. And again, you can sign up for Watson Analytics today at www.watsonanalytics.com. And I think now is a good time maybe to open this up for questions and see what the attendees, what you're interested in hearing. So I think we'll start taking questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Steve. We have some great questions already, so please, everyone, feel free to put your comments and questions in the chat feature. I think the first one is for you, Steve. We have an audience member that wants to know if you have a version of Watson Analytics for teaching data analytics in classes.
Yeah, thanks, Alma. I think, and Girish could probably expand on this as well, but yes, we do have a teaching edition of Watson Analytics both for the professor and for students so that they can kind of collaborate on the work that they may be doing. And Girish, I think you've used that in one of your courses.
Yes, Steve. So here is what I did is that students started out with the same data resources, and since they were working on the same class project, they were working on teams that were competing with each other. So the capability in the software was that each team could collaborate in real time and see each other's work, but not see the work of other teams. So that was, the students liked that feature quite a bit.
Great. Thank you to both of you for that explanation. So next question for you two. We have an audience member that wants more information about the security of the data and how the data is actually loaded.
Yeah, so there's a couple different ways. I mean, generally if you're just uploading a spreadsheet, or so either an Excel file or a CSV file, it's simply just uploading it into Watson Analytics. There's also a number of database connectors that are also part of the product as you get into some of the paid additions. So it is fairly simple. Now you are moving your data into the cloud, and I can say that the Watson Analytics sits on IBM SoftLayer, which is our cloud platform. And this is hosted in Toronto, as far as where those servers sit. And then, as far as the security, so all of IBM's data centers, and now we're kind of getting into some technical terms, but they are, SOC 2 and ISO 27001 certified. And if you do want some more information around the security and the compliance, I would recommend going to www.softlayer.com/compliance, and that'll give you the full list of certifications and the data, what happens to your data when it's uploaded. But it is secure and it is kept private. No one can see what you're uploading. Your tenant, your use of Watson Analytics is entirely controlled by it's yours. No one else is seeing it. Now IBM doesn't even see it.
Okay, thank you. And next question is can these analytics be used to find information on your target audience or customer base, or to find as market research?
Yeah, hopefully I understand the question correctly, but as long as you have data on your customers, you can analyze it in Watson Analytics. It is a data-dependent tool. So you do need to have data. So if you are analyzing maybe your existing customers and you want to better understand them, of maybe who are your most profitable customers, who is responding to campaigns, and maybe use that information to build out that target profile, you can certainly do that. But it does require having the data itself in order to do that analysis. And the same thing that if you maybe purchase some market research data, say from Nielsen, again, you can put that data into Watson Analytics and analyze it to extract some of those key findings. But you do need to have the data itself first.
Okay, and does the ability to monitor social media come standard with IBM Watson Analytics?
It does not. So there is, there's Watson Analytics, which is the data discovery service, and then there is kind of an additional product called Watson Analytics for social media. So that would need to be when purchasing Watson Analytics for social media, you actually get Watson Analytics itself. So they are essentially joint products, but it is an additional feature that comes with some additional parts to do that social media monitoring and kind of building out social media data sets based on different topics and themes that you are wanting to understand, and then you can then analyze that data set just like as you would any other data in Watson Analytics. But right now, I think we're up to that pulls data from sources such as Twitter, Facebook, comments, reviews, and you as a user have the ability to select which sources you want to build out that particular data set. So I probably should have covered that a little bit more in the presentation because I think that is something that people are interested in. So if you go to the website, there is a lot of information on Watson Analytics for social media, and if you want to trial it, there is a trial for that product as well.
Okay, great. And we have an audience member that wanted some further clarification on the telco example. So during that you mentioned social listening. Does Watson have social listening capabilities?
Yeah, and again, that's coming from the Watson Analytics for Social Media product, and it doesn't necessarily listen in real time, but you can set up, depending on what you're looking to better understand, you're setting up that particular project related to different topics, and then the teams kind of narrow down that topic. So a good example would be, maybe if you're looking at grocery stores and you would list out, the topics would be the names of grocery stores like Whole Foods and Trader Joe's and Kroger's, or depending on where, your regional grocery store. And then the themes would be things like selection, customer service, price, cleanliness, and that then kind of pulls together the data set for you based on that, and then kind of allows you to start to look at things like, what's the share of voice, what are people talking about, who are they talking about related to those grocery stores, and you get some demographic information, some sentiment information. But it's not necessarily in real time. It is kind of, you're building a historical data set based on a time frame that you choose as the user.
Okay, thanks again, and I'll just keep going. These are great questions that everyone is bringing to us, so thanks again. We have a comment and a question from an audience member. So Watson Analytics, he understands that they only build analytical models, not predictive models, or if it does, they are not sure how. So if you can elaborate a little bit on that.
So for the predictive models, decision trees is a methodology within Watson Analytics. And in decision trees, as we know, we are trying to predict an outcome, which could be customer, not a customer, or it could be any kind of selection between 2 or 3 different marketing strategies. So for instance, in an advertising context, you may go with campaign A or with campaign B. So that capability is there.
Great, thank you so much for that insight, Girish. And on to the next question. And so regarding predictive modeling, would you please elaborate on some of the statistical tools for estimation?
Again, the most common predictive tool, of course, is linear regression, as most of us know. Now, linear regression works on several assumptions. And so one of the things to make sure would be whether these assumptions are valid in the context in which the software is being used. And that is not easy to do because you need some kind of a statistical background to test out those assumptions, as I said earlier in the talk. As an alternative to linear regression, again, I would emphasize that there are methodologies like decision trees, that at least some of the analytical tools that build decision trees are based on very few assumptions, if any. And in fact, I could make a general statement that most of the artificial intelligence analytical modeling tools are not based on statistical assumptions. And in the age of big data, they have been found to be quite useful in finding patterns and then coming up with actionable findings.
Okay, thank you again. And the next question for the two of you, an audience member wanted to know if there are offerings of small business packages as well as subscription offerings. Is there a monthly, annual fee? Just a little bit more information about that.
Yeah, there currently are 3 editions of Watson Analytics. There's a free edition, there's what we call the Plus edition, and then the Professional edition. So free, obviously pretty self-explanatory. It is free for perpetuity. And then as you progress to Plus and Professional, you're essentially unlocking more data storage additional data connectors, and in the case of the professional edition, you are also unlocking the ability to collaborate within a single tenant. So you would have a group of people, just as again Gears described earlier with the students. Everyone's existing within that same tenant, and then the users themselves have the ability to either keep things that they're working on private, or they can share it with the group. So that does kind of alleviate some concerns where some people in that group may not have rights to certain data, or the ability to view confidential data that you can select who can and can't view what you're doing in there. But it does kind of open up that ability to collaborate. For the Plus and the Professional Edition, there is a monthly fee for those. So it is essentially a subscription purchase with a monthly fee associated with those editions. And then the Watson Analytics for social media is kind of a separate product, but again, kind of follows the same. There's a Plus and a Professional edition, and again, kind of opens up more data and the ability to create larger data sets based on social media data, and kind of follows a similar model. But when you're buying, for example, if you're buying Watson Analytics for social media, you are getting Watson Analytics as part of that fee.
All right, and on to another great question. How can a startup firm utilize this as a newly formed business?
Yeah, I think, one of the ways, again, we are providing it as a free service, and so there is necessarily, when you sign up for the trial, you're getting 30 days of the Professional edition, and then you can continue with the free edition if you choose not to pay for the Plus or the Professional. So as a startup, we are making it fairly easy for you to start using this without having to necessarily pay anything at first. So we want to help you kind of demonstrate the value and uncover some interesting things out of your data, some actionable intelligence that you can use to make better decisions. So I think anybody, whether it's a startup or even an established business or a Fortune 500 company, they can use Watson Analytics. As long as you have that, basically as long as you have that data and that question, you can use Watson Analytics.
Okay, and can Watson do joins on multiple data sources, like bringing data from outside and analyze them by combining it with joins?
Yeah, very popular question. Comes up frequently, and the answer is not yet. That is functionality that is coming, though. The expectation is that we will be able to do joins in the product before the end of the year in 2016. So it's coming.
Just to elaborate on that, in a teaching situation, my students had to join data sets from different sources. So the workaround they used was to create Excel files that were coming from these different sources, and then use Excel to join them into a single file, and then upload to Watson Analytics. So there are workarounds, when you have multiple sources of data.
All right, and then on to the next question for you two. We have an audience member that wrote that she is interested in how the algorithm works about asking questions. Is there a specific model about how to ask a question? And I find that sometimes it seems that I'm not asking the right question for the insight I'm trying to receive. For example, if I'm trying to figure out what is the best time to post content based on engagement rates, how would I ask that question?
Yeah, and that's a good question. And within the product, there are some tutorials and there is some best practices on how to phrase the question. But to answer your question specifically, it would be difficult unless we could actually see the data itself and how it's organized and laid out in order to phrase that question. So I know that's not necessarily the best answer, but it's a difficult question to answer without actually seeing your data. But I would recommend maybe checking out those best practices, and they do they do tell you in the tutorial how to phrase questions, and so it might just be a matter of playing around with it a little bit until you get the the results that you want to see.
All right. And are there any existing trending mathematical models as part of Watson?
So with Watson Analytics right now, so I'm assuming you're asking kind of about like forecasting and time series analysis and kind of looking at trends. And so right now, forecasting is another functionality that is coming. So the ability to generate forecasts and do time series analysis and temporal causal modeling is coming. Again, that's expected to be later this year. But as far as trending, though, you can. I mean, if you do have some historical data and just want to see, what have sales done over the last year, it does display that today. So if you wanted to simply type, trend of customer response by month, it will show you, that trend line. But now it won't necessarily project that out into the future yet until that forecasting functionality is added into Watson Analytics.
Okay, I think we might have time for just a couple more. So is there a proper way to organize our data as clean as possible before uploading into Watson to make it relevant and reliable?
Yeah, as far as it comes to Excel files or CSV files, generally that first row should be the column headers. So there shouldn't be any sort of descriptive information there. Sometimes we see customers that have a spreadsheet, but the first couple of rows are taken up with marketing campaigns by month, or they have some sort of descriptive title within the spreadsheet itself. That all needs to be removed, and the data does need to be flattened. That top row needs to be the column headers, and it generally helps to be dealing with raw data and not necessarily aggregated data. So if you've kind of been given a roll-up of information, it's best to try to get that raw data so that you're working kind of from the beginning and not something that may have been rolled up for you in order to be able to do that type of analysis.
Okay, great. And an audience member wanted to know how much time does it take a typical user to get familiar with the platform enough to use it productively on a small project?
I think that the learning curve, it's going to be somewhat subjective. We've been told by a lot of the industry analysts that we work with, like Gartner and Forrester, that this is one of the easiest products they've ever seen introduced because of things like interacting with natural language questions and being given recommended starting points. It really lowers that learning curve. And hopefully, and then maybe I'll pass over to Girish as well to kind of see what has his experience been with some of the students that he works with, because I know that he deals with kind of a range of MBA students that some have an analytical background and some don't. So maybe he can also maybe share a little bit of what the learning curve has been like.
For MBA students, they picked up the software very quickly, and that was to be expected because of their status as MBA students. So I would say in about an hour's worth of investment, they were up and running with the software.
Cool. Thanks, Girish.
Oh, thank you. And I think this next question might be towards Girish as well. We have an audience member that wants to know, for education and professors, how does that affect costs?
I think Stephen already answered that, but for academics, which would include professors and students, they have a special service which makes the software available for free as long as it's used for academic purposes. And they make available the professional edition for that purpose. So I think that requires some approval or sign up. But for academics, it's I believe it's free in perpetuity. Stephen, please correct me on that.
No, yeah, that's accurate. And I think the only thing is that just as you would have to kind of renew it every year, just to kind of continue to validate that you are still a teacher and still a student and still using it for those purposes.
Okay, great. Thank you both for that clarification. I think we might end it with a technical question. So in prediction, does Watson have most machine learning algorithms or just two like linear regression and decision tree?
Yeah, right now in the predictive part of Watson Analytics, it is primarily using linear regression, and it's using a chain decision tree to generate the results. So those are the two techniques that are currently in Watson Analytics. We are in the process of adding more. As I touched on earlier, forecasting is going to be added here before the end of the year, most likely. And then right now we're kind of prioritizing and looking at what other sort of techniques should we add to Watson Analytics and start to put those functionalities into Watson Analytics. And really I think some of it kind of comes back to what makes the most sense for this target user that we've identified as being that business user. So if you are someone that's more knowledgeable, you may not necessarily see all the techniques that you would see in something like SPSS Modeler or obviously even in the programming language R. So there's kind of a process of what makes the most sense for our user and what techniques would be most beneficial for them. So I think as the product is continuing to be developed, you'll see more techniques added that kind of broaden the use cases and broaden the benefits that users can get out of the product.
I just want to add to that. As I said, that I've used this software in an MBA class and also in an MS class. And some of the methodologies that Stephen mentioned, like R or advanced modeling algorithms, there are workarounds, as I'd indicated earlier, because I had students use all kinds of analytical modeling algorithms, and they were able to either through interfaces which currently don't exist in Watson Analytics. In fact, they don't. They would go to other pieces of software, and just using their creativity, they could bring in other methodologies as well.
Okay, well I believe that is all the time that we have for today. Girish and Stephen, thank you so much for all of this great information and your insight. Just as a reminder, AMA members can view an archive of this webcast at any time by visiting ama.org/webcast. Please also take a moment to complete the post-webcast survey. Let us know what you thought of today's webcast and what topics you want to see presented on future webcasts. We really appreciate your feedback. I want to thank IBM Watson Analytics again, our generous sponsor, and as well as ReadyTalk, who provided us with the web conferencing platform for today's webcast. If you'd like to learn more about ReadyTalk and their services, please feel free to visit readytalk.com/AMA. And last but not least, I'd like to thank the audience for your participation and your time, and I wish everyone a great rest of your day. Thank you so much.